It kind of looks like a podcast because I got this.
It does. That's good. Is that a Blue Yeti?
I think so. It says blue on it, so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I like podcasts a lot, so. I look like a podcast person, but it's getting in the way, so I'll move it over here. Okay. I am Lucas Hoffman, okay? And you're Kevin McAllister, right? Yeah.
I am.
It's weird. Your name is a lot like, you know Home Alone?
I do.
Yeah. His name's Kevin McAllister, and I was like, whenever I looked you, I was trying to look you up a little bit, and all that was coming up was Kevin McAllister. I was wondering why that was, but yeah.
That's I get that a lot during my always, especially towards the latter half of the year when people start watching Christmas movies. Comes up quite often.
Okay, so you're a site reliability engineer. Is that correct?
It's the closest thing. I mean, my job title is principal engineer, but that job, like if you were to look up those descriptions of what Google says that's the very closest to what the kind of work I do. So yeah, I think that's the best way to put it.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a few questions about your profession then. And I thought I would start at the beginning, like around college. So, I think you entered college wanting to become an electrical engineer. Is that correct?
I actually entered wanting to be a mechanical engineer because when I was in high school, my physics teacher was great and I loved physics. And to me, my idea going into college was that physics was like mechanical engineering was application of physics. The good thing there was the first year I went to Drexel University, and the first year there they had a program about getting a job. They had a co-op program, and I had to research what kind of jobs I would do as a mechanical engineer, and I did not like any of them. None of them were interesting to me at all. But I was into computers and programming and electronics, so I switched to electrical engineering in my first year.
What were some of the jobs then that you didn't really like?
Well, so mechanical engineering, a lot of what I was seeing was sort of designing of enclosures. Like, for instance, this was in terms of computers, but in technology, like you would think about designing sort of a computer enclosure, right? I don't know. You had said to me in your letter that you're into retro gaming. The original Xbox had a real heating problem where the solder would melt because they didn't have good cooling, and some mechanical engineering staff made a real mistake there when the red ring of death. That kind of stuff would be a responsibility of mechanic. Other things like that too, like anything in your car that is designed to work a certain way could be a mechanical engineer's job. So I was right; it was applied physics, but that was not the sort of thing that I was very interested in.
Yeah. Okay, that kind of makes sense. So that led you into a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you change what you went to college for then?
The good news is because I came, and I really credit the people who designed Drexel's program, because I came to the decision in my first year, it didn't change a whole lot in what I was studying. So the first year of engineering, and I think this is pretty universal for engineering degrees, the first year, even the first 2 years are very much the same for almost every major. We were studying mathematics, physics, some chemistry, some very basics. So it didn't change anything that I didn't have to retake any classes or take classes that I had missed out on. But it did change the way I thought about my career. It actually made me think about my career, which I hadn't before. I basically, as I said to you, my idea was I like physics, mechanical engineering is physics. So, let's study that. Instead, I started thinking like, oh, this is a job I'll have to do. I'm not going to enjoy any of this. But my whole life, I enjoyed sort of programming, doing electronics. And so it seemed natural. And I also had several friends, like we had a study group that would work together on projects and stuff. And they were in electrical engineering. And so it was very easy to sort of switch to that. And then my electrical engineering did not have a lot of computer programming, so I just added that on myself because you could just take extra classes if they fit in your schedule or if you paid for them. So
How long did you go to college for then?
it was 5 years, but it was always a 5 year program.
Okay.
So because the way Drexel works, they have a co-op program where you'll spend 18 months working full time in your industry, and that's what this class was about. It was preparing you for. It like kind of taught you how to write a resume and do interviews and research what kind of jobs you might be looking for. And the idea was, so I'd go for a normal year from the fall until the spring. I'd have that summer off, and then that next fall I would go to work for 6 months. And that first fall I worked in the engineering lab at Drexel as my co-op. But that was how that worked. Like that was built into the program. The idea was when you graduated in 5 years, you had 18 months of industry experience on your resume. And so not only did you have a degree in engineering, but you also had some work, which I found, and it was very useful for me to have, just to be forced to think about, instead of I'm in college, now I have to go try to find a job, in like it was intermixed. And so it sort of changed my thinking. Very helpful.
Okay. Um, so do you ever wish that you stayed with what you originally wanted to be a mechanical engineer?
My first reaction to that was no, although one of I'm interested in learning all the time. So
Yeah.
the idea that there's opportunities like to learn about other things or to think about those types of systems or designing things, a very very little bit, but no, like I'm going with my original answer. Like I don't miss that idea at all. Like I was glad with the decision I made. Potentially you could like just kind of change, like if you think about the choice though, for any research you did on site reliability engineering, the thing that I do today is a lot of typing in computers, running systems, like making Linux systems work, writing programs. But like electrical engineering, could be a lot of electronics work, right? And I don't do hardly any of that. I mean, most of that's sort of a hobby for me. Do I wish I could have gone down that? And you might even have questions for me on that. So
Yeah.
maybe.
So you
But for
work.
mechanical engineering, no, I don't regret my choice at all.
So you work more with software versus
Yep,
hardware. Okay.
absolutely.
Um. So you work for Cordell, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it? Cordell or
Core
Cordell?
dial, yeah, just like they were two separate words but smashed together.
Okay. So what exact role do you play in this company?
So I was there from the very beginning. I was, I think you'd call it a founding employee. There were three founders who put their money on the line as the sort of CEO and the owners of the company, and then there was myself and one other employee that worked. So I'm the CEO of the company. He's a friend of mine, and I've known him for years, and so he brought me in at the very beginning. So I've played almost every high technical role at the company possible. Basically, I've been there 15 years now, just over 15 years now, which in the internet age is sort of unheard of. Most people in my sort of roles switch jobs every year and a half to 2 years. But I, the sort of role I play is system design, mostly that technology sort of like if we're building a system, like, we have a problem we want to solve. We want to make it so that people can make, well, a recent one we've had to solve is they wanted to add SMS, text messaging capabilities to our system. Mostly it's phones. And basically, in order to bring that in, we had to integrate with other companies, like work with other companies to work with their APIs. And basically, I help design, build, implement the system of how that will work going forward. So it's a lot of thinking about what you're going to do and then trying it and failing repeatedly until you actually know how it'll work, and then figuring out a way that it'll work very reliably, so your customers don't have to deal with problems. So that's basically the job, always.
So does the software update a lot, like upgrade it a lot? Because if it's been around for like 15 years, I imagine that it has changed a tremendous amount.
Uh, it sure has. We've, I mean, at the very beginning, we barely had anything. Like we almost were building everything from scratch. Um, it, it's amazing because there are pieces of what we built in the first year that are still in use. And sometimes we're not terribly proud of them. I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you sort of did a project before and then you kind of come across it a couple years later and you look at it and you're like, oh, I didn't do such a great job on that.
Yeah.
But I think there's two ways to look at it. You can say, oh, I didn't do such a great job of that and feel bad. Or you can say, actually, I know so much better now. I can see how poorly I had done there. So that's a positive. The other thing you can say is, and it's still working, right? So that's sort of, even though I feel that I've learned from that person who did that 2 years ago, I also a little sense of pride for that person who did that 2 years ago. Like the thing that they did is still working. That it's you can sort of take it that way too. And the other thing is, just like any problem you come into, it's an opportunity to improve. Like if it's causing problems now, it's like, well, this is good because the thing that I built is so successful, more people want to use it and it's not standing up to it, right? So like when we first started building these systems, we had maybe 300-400 phones using it. And I remember one of our investors invited us to his very nice shore house when we got to 20,000 users, right? And today we have over 375,000 phones relying on our systems. And so you're exactly right. There have been many changes to try and keep up with that. Some things that are barely keeping up with it right now. Some things that are way better, and some things that you're a little sort of embarrassed to look at and say, "I can't believe I did this 10 years ago." So
Yeah, so it's been through a lot and it has grown a lot. Like, how's the company itself grown?
So as I mentioned, when we started, there were 5 people, right?
Yeah.
There are now over 170. We've purchased 2 other companies.
Oh,
Like
really?
the last 6 months I spent working with a company that we purchased that builds a video collaboration product very much like Zoom that we're using. So we're trying to sort of compete in the same market they are. So we bought this company that has built this. It's a company you'll never have heard of because they were not doing that great, which is why we could afford to buy them. But the company is called Ezus. But the technology is really good. So we're working to integrate that. But it's very interesting because initially, obviously, we all worked in the same office, and then we bought a company that was based in Texas, so we had to get used to working remote. And now, of course, during the pandemic, a lot more of us are remote. And then we bought this company who has employees in Slovakia, California. There's someone somewhere else too. Anyway, it's now a worldwide company, and so people in different time zones. All in these video collaboration products trying to get work done. It's changed significantly.
Well, seems like it's so big now. Like, how do you troubleshoot all of that software?
This is a great question. Sometimes it's very hard. And as we've grown, the groups that sort of work in the high technology, there was like two of us, and now there are probably about 50 in that I work with very closely. And there's new, like, to me, everyone's a new guy in the company, but there's new employees. And the good news for me is I know a little bit about every system because I've worked on them all. And that's also bad news because I get asked to work on troubleshooting a lot of them. So sometimes there's sort of a delay, but it's a challenge. I think some of the important things are to keep good notes, to have good documentation, to encourage other people to learn it as well as you do, right? So to be able to not be very sharing with the information. I think I saw you like to share. You had shared with me a YouTube video where you had done some work, and you were basically saying, "Hey, I figured out how to do this. This is how I do it." That sort of attitude is very helpful in the workplace. There are some people who like guard their knowledge. They like to sort of hoard it and say, "Oh, I'm the one who knows this. I don't want anyone else to know. It makes me valuable." But it's exactly the opposite, where you're more willing to enable other people to do the work. That opens more opportunities for you to do different work, learn new things, and also makes those people valuable. Like they learn from you, and then they're able to do more.
So, what was this the video conferencing thing called again?
So the product was called Vibe from a company called Ezeus. We're going to change the name to Coronexa. It's a secret. It's not really a secret because you're recording this and you might publish it. But our beta of Coronexa will start in December 2nd is our date that we've promised. So it's very busy. But it's very similar to Zoom, right? So you can have a meeting. I think the things where it differs is it has a lot of. I think the best way to describe it is the way the teams who build it use it. These teams were always remote, and instead of joining only for meetings like I did here, right? I had this predetermined time to talk with you. They just go and they go and join and they sit in there, right? And you could do that with Zoom, but it's not sort of designed for it. So like this morning when I got to work, I dropped in on the room of the team I'm working with, and there's just 6 people sitting there. We're not really talking, but at any time, someone can sort of unmute their microphone and say, "Hey, I got a question about whatever," or "I'm trying to do this. Does anyone know how?" Right? And it helps with that sort of collaborative environment. If you were working just sitting at desks near each other, and you could just yell out to your colleague and say, "Hey, can you help me with this? I have a question." And it's actually, it seemed weird to me, being used to working in person with people mostly, but it's actually a tremendous value. And it's even better than in person because if I really need to focus and I can't have distractions, I can just leave the room. Whereas when I'm sitting in a room with 10 other people and everyone starts talking, it's hard to ignore that without putting on headphones or something. So
Okay. So you're still working on this project, right?
I am.
That's the main thing you're working on right now, then?
Yeah, it's where I'm spending the vast majority of my time. Yes.
Okay. What other projects have you worked on then?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Well, I mean, everything from the beginning. I'm trying to think of a good example. This one's somewhat interesting. So when the last couple of years, we've sort of made a switch. For the beginning, when we first started doing this, we would buy physical Dell hardware servers that we put in racks, and we would run our software on there, right? So if we were on a phone call, it was software running right on this very expensive server. And it was managing our processes on this very metal, very traditional way. And then the alternative there is to use virtual machines. Do you know what that is? Virtual machines.
Not much.
So the idea is like I know you're familiar with sort of Raspberry Pi, like that's a computer, right? And you can run Linux on there. In the way you work with virtual machines is you would get a sort of a bigger computer, and instead of just saying one operating system, one computer, I would run as a program on that computer a single whole operating system, and it works in isolation. So I'd have a Linux computer and I could have a Windows computer next to it, and it's all in one piece of hardware, right? And this is the basic technology that enables, like when you hear people talk about the cloud, I mean that word doesn't mean anything, but this is what they're talking about, is the ability to very quickly create, because it's expensive, right? I can buy a computer, it takes them 2 weeks to ship it to me. I have to physically put it somewhere and plug it in, wire it all up. And then I have to install the software on it. And then I like install the operating system, install the software. And that's a very slow and expensive process. So it doesn't lead itself to a lot of experimentation. Whereas if I can just launch a new Windows computer on a bigger computer I'm already running and install the software, I can do that in minutes and not days, weeks, and I can test something. I can realize, oh, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. So we moved from, we still have probably 800 hardware servers in Philadelphia and Phoenix, Arizona, that are where our stuff runs. And a couple of years ago, we took on a project to use something called OpenStack, which is a system for running these sort of virtualized clouds. And we installed, I'm going to say 30 servers. And those 30 servers can take the place of like 400 or 500 of those servers that I just mentioned, right? So, we installed those 30 servers. And then we learned how to do all that stuff and started moving all our things into these virtualized environments. And so that's the way we were able to. It's saving us money. It's giving us more flexibility to test and do things like that. So I worked on almost every aspect of that project, to picking the hardware, to figuring out how to do it, to the different companies we're going to work with to buy things.
So the computer is over in Phoenix, Arizona, and you're pretty much, it's running from Phoenix, but you're having it display over where you are.
Yep.
Is that how it works, pretty much simplified?
Yeah, that's a very good way to think about it. And it's not like where I'm sitting, like I'm sitting right now at a Mac, at an iMac. I don't usually, I won't typically be working at the desktop environment on these computers. I'll just be working on a terminal, just typing text and enabling these sort of web services. But yeah, it's exactly that. For instance, this Zoom call, there's a computer somewhere. I happen to know that they use Amazon as their servers. There's a virtual machine in Amazon's cloud running that our video and audio is passing through right now.
Yeah.
And so that's the same sort of thing I'll do with our phone calls and our video services.
Okay. So you're like guarding all the servers that are getting used. Okay.
Absolutely.
What is your favorite project that you have had to work on?
My favorite. So one of the biggest values for me is learning new things. So for me, it's going to be hard for me to not say that the thing I'm working on right now is my favorite.
Yeah.
That's such an easy answer. I'm trying to think if I can think of a better one. I'm going to go with that. Right now, the thing I'm doing is is kind of my favorite, because some of the skills I've cultivated that I really enjoy are being able to understand systems quickly when I'm not familiar with it, right? Just trying to learn, trying to piece it together. And of course, we purchased this company, so we have the experts. They can explain things to me, but someone telling you something and then you really understanding it are two separate things. And so I'm getting to spend a lot of time understanding this system they built, how it works, and the limitations that exist. So like, why, I can see the reasons why it's good, but why are the reasons that it's not good? What are the problems we're going to have? As you said, guarding the servers. When I have, like right now, we have maybe 200-300 users using it. What about next year when there's 3,000, or hopefully more than that, hopefully 15,000? What problems am I going to have, and how am I going to fix that? So not only being able to learn, like, I don't know how this works, to go from I don't know how this works at all, to be able to go tell them, by the way, we need to change the way this works because next year it's not going to work for us to support 3 times this number of users. So that's what I'm really enjoying, and plus I'm getting to work with new code, right? Language, right? A lot of this is written in Java, which I've worked with before, but I haven't worked with recently. So it's fun to sort of dust off that old knowledge. And right now, my job is to make it launch faster. So I don't know, when you launch Zoom, it takes 2 seconds. I know this because I've timed it very, very many times. When you launch our product, it takes 24 seconds. That's too long. You would get bored watching it load. So I've gotten that down to 17. I want to get it down to 2 by the time we get the beta. So that's my sort of active project right now, to like figure out, what are we doing? Can we do it faster? Can I cheat and do it in the background while something else is going on? So that's what I'm enjoying doing right now.
So I know right now you're not going to be working with others as much, like in person, but like on a normal year or whatever, how much do you think, like, how much do you need to work with others? Like,
Very interesting, because being a technologist and being into technology, I found that I very much enjoyed working alone a lot throughout a lot of my career, or through a lot of my, when I was younger. What I've learned over the last, I'll say 20 years of working, is that the hardest part of the work is not the technology and understanding it, but it is the communication with the other people who are helping you do the work, right? So I'm sure you've had to do team projects in school, and I'm sure you've had those experiences where there's like 1 or 2 people on the team who aren't really doing a thing, and you're sort of upset with that, but then you have to figure out how to talk to them about it without like having a big argument, or maybe you don't, maybe just do all the work. There's this I have bad news for you. This goes on for the rest of your life. The good news is you can get good at those. So, even me, who would be very much prefer to sort of sit on my own and look at code and not have to talk to people, that would be the personality I'd cultivated. I learned how to communicate with people in a way that is constructive, right? To solve those problems. And so it's actually the most important thing in all my work. Is so often I'll have an idea of something I want to do, but I'll need other people's help, and I need to convince them that it's a good idea. And in order to convince them, I have to get really good at explaining my ideas, at sort of reading the room. Are they not getting it? Are they not understanding it? And it's even more challenging now, with this sort of working remote, because when you're in person with people, you can tell a lot from body language and eye contact and everything. And when you're remote, especially if they're not using cameras, it's hard to tell if they're even there, if they're not saying anything. So.
Do you work with clients a lot, like you personally?
I have over the years, right? So when I first started, when there were 5 of us, the support phone, when you called in my company to call support, it would ring on my desk. So I would answer the phone when one of my customers had a problem, and I would help them through it. So I've had that experience over the years. Currently, not a lot, although I do get opportunities to talk to our customers. And that is actually always great. So did you have a follow up on that or?
Well, I was just like wondering. So I guess you don't really work with the people one on one. You really just work on the software for them to use, and then somebody else just relays to you what they want.
That very often that's the case.
Okay. Well, in the letter you said like some days you have to stay up till like 2 a.m. working on something.
I was up till 1 last night.
Oh, really?
I was.
Well, it feels like it interferes a lot with your personal life. So, like, how does your day outside of work like look?
Mm. Um, it's so one of the things I learned when I was younger in doing this, I would have stayed up till 1 last night, and then I would have gotten up at by the way, I was up till 1 for a different reason than the Eagles game. I also had to work at midnight. But I would have been up till midnight anyway watching the Eagles,
Yeah.
but that's a different issue. My but when I was younger, I would have just gotten up normal time. I would have gotten up at 7 and been at work at 8. This morning, I set certain boundaries with my work that, like I'm going, unless there is, very, very extreme situation where something's really broken and they need my help, I'm going to go get 7 hours of sleep. Right. So I woke up at 9. And so I was sort of fresh in that regard. That does push other things back with my personal life. Like I have a family and children. And so sometimes, the hours being weird, I'll have to shift times around. But again, I'll set those boundaries, meaning that if I know I have to work late, maybe I have to start working at 10 till 1 or 2. I'll make sure that maybe I stop work early that day so I can spend time with my family. But that's a thing I definitely had to learn. When I would spend all my time working when I was very young, and now I'll have different values that I'll pursue at different times, hobbies and whatnot.
So it seems like your day's pretty flexible then.
Yes, and that is a real benefit to the job I do. The people I work with know that, like if Zoom right now in the middle of the day decided they were going to do maintenance and took down all these meetings that were going on, it would be a real disruptive. So, and of course they're sort of worldwide, so they have to plan their work, because sometimes you have to reboot things, you have to install new software, and things are not going to work great. And so they have to plan their work in such a way, and my company knows we have to do the same thing, right? Like my customers don't want their phones not to work at 11 a.m., but they don't care at 3 a.m. Because of that, my employer and the people I work with are very flexible in that regard. And often that comes down to, like, as long as you're getting your responsibilities done and your employer is good with it, then the flexibility could be there.
Well, so during non-COVID years, would it be more locked in place, not as flexible?
It's gotten way more flexible, I would say, due to the pandemic and COVID. I, in a certain sense, because I have so much, I've been here so long, and I've personally had a lot of flexibility. And when I've managed teams, I've extended that to them for the same reasons, because I understand, like when I was managing people and they would say, hey, I have a meeting at my kid's school at 2 o'clock. I'd like, go, this is, I like, because I might call you at 2 o'clock in the morning to help me and I expect your help. So, when you tell me you need help at 2 p.m, like, go for it. Right. That said, we were very much a work in the office company. We did not have a lot of work from home people, very few, like 4 or 5. And it was somewhat frowned upon. And now, because of this, my company has a policy in place. There are some people that I expect will never come back to the office because of the flexibility it affords them. And so, yeah, there's a lot more now than there was.
How bad did your area get hit by COVID then?
Um, We were so um, we're we're just on the out. We're a next county out from Philadelphia. So I live in Bucks. My office is in Montgomery County, and then Philadelphia County. Philadelphia County, obviously the worst hit in Pennsylvania as far as cases, as far as all the numbers. I'm pretty sure Montgomery and Bucks were early having a lot of high numbers, and I guess we're having a lot of high numbers again. And so um, pretty bad in that regard, where you would see, hey, a lot of people are getting sick, or a lot of people are testing positive, and a lot of people are really sick. And so and we closed pretty early in that regard. So like March 13th was the first day that I worked from home, sort of full time. And I haven't been back in the office since then. And so it was very, it was very disruptive for for my work and for my personal life, for my kids' school and everything.
Well, how is like their school responding to it, and how's like the town responding to it? Like, are they back
Um,
little or?
no, so so the the school district that my kids attended, which is Centennial, they closed and went to a sort of a virtual for that fourth quarter of last year.
Mhm.
And I was not very like, so that was the sort of initial. I was not very impressed with, and I was sort of grading on a curve. I knew that they did not expect the pandemic either, but the schoolwork was very. They gave them a lot of work to do. There was no sort of direct instruction, more like, we're going to post these things, you have to read them and do these activities and give them back, and turn them in. And so they worked out a system for doing that. But then at the end, they did not, and I can understand why they didn't take any of the grades. It didn't change any grades. They basically just said, did the whole fourth quarter as pass fail. Um, so whatever your grade was at the end of the third quarter for that year, that was your grade. Um, and I I paid very close attention to the sort of school board and what they were talking about over the summer to see what they were going to do in the fall. And we saw that it was not very, my wife and I had talked about it, and we were not very impressed with their plan. We didn't think it was going to be great. It wasn't going to be great for our students. It was going to be remote, and it is currently remote for that school district. We ended up moving our kids. They transferred into a charter school that is online. It's a Pennsylvania school that's been online for 10 years. We had done some research, and they're a little more asynchronous. But our thought was, and after our research, that they had been doing this already for years, and that they would probably be a little more equipped to sort of handle this situation. And of course, they're a little disrupted because a lot of people made that choice. So they had a lot more students to contend with. But so far, I'm pretty happy with that decision. So that's going on. As far as the township, I don't know what they did. I mean, they put some signs in the parks telling us to wear masks or something. It was, everyone I see in the community is sort of, I go to the supermarket, people are wearing masks, they're staying away, they're doing all the things more or less that you expect. So I think in that regard, the response has been okay. It hasn't been overly, I hear about some places where they're starting to fine people for not wearing masks or something. I haven't heard of any of that locally yet. So
Are people pretty much like over COVID by now where you live?
um, mentally, there is a real fatigue to it. I've seen from people. They're very. I would say I've heard that from many people. I'm over it. I don't know that means that they're sort of acting irresponsibly, or if they're just fed up with the sort of disruption to the way their life used to be. Because, it's one thing that you think about it, and there are risks, and people are sort of, weighing them and doing, as I said, most experiences I've had when I've been out of my house are people are sort of doing the right thing. I mean, yeah, there's people who don't know how to wear a mask, they have their nose hanging out. There's people who are not sort of following the rules, but they're very few and far between as far as I can see. Um, but I can see that it's like, hey, I enjoy going to movie theaters. I enjoy going to restaurants. Well, my movie theater closed, and I can't go sit in a restaurant. Really, I mean, I can a little bit, but and I could sit outside. Like for my wedding anniversary, we went to a nice restaurant and sat on their patio, and it was nice. But in the winter, it's going to be cold. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I think that is a sentiment that a lot of people share, and it's right now with this uptick in numbers, it's a little frustrating.
How much longer do you think this is going to last? Because it's almost been a year now, I feel. Seems like you've been off of work for like 7 months, or not off, but virtual.
Yeah, I've been working a lot, but I have been virtual. So my office has reopened very gradually. That 20 people are authorized to go in the office if they want, and they are. And we have a whole bunch of rules in place about where and when you have to wear masks and how often people can be everywhere. But they are. Uh, um, I think it's hard for me to judge. Sometimes I feel very cynical, and I find the news very sort of negative and frustrating. And I'll think very cynically that like this will all be over on November 4th after the election when people are tired about reporting on it. I don't actually think that's true, but that's sort of a cynical view. I think the real hope is the work that the people in the medical community to come up with superior treatments, whatever there is with regards to vaccine. I don't think that that's the only answer. There are a lot of sort of diseases that we as humans can contract and that are very serious. But if there are very effective treatment options, especially for the people who are very vulnerable, then you could start to get back to a more normal situation. Whereas, like, yeah, it's a thing, and you don't want to get it. I think I don't, because I said in my community, I see so many people following the rules, but I still see numbers going up. I think it's going to be hard to not for this to continue to go for at least another 6 months. In a certain sense, I think some people are starting to relax restrictions. Like my local Chick-fil-A lets people walk in to pick up their food instead of them walking out to you. But and I think from some certain small businesses, they're going to need to, get more work or get a new, find a new way of buying food. So it's hard for me to predict, but I'm hoping, that science, and the medical people out there continue to do the good work that they're doing.
Do you feel like you have lost anything by being so isolated and staying in your house a lot more during lockdown?
Definitely. One of my favorite sort of pastime activities was playing basketball, and I haven't played basketball since March. We would play like I was sort of organizer of a group at work who would play at lunch on Wednesdays. We would go, actually we got the company to pay to rent the court for us, so we would go have a nice court we could play at. So we play basketball for a nice hour and a half. I also played with another group of people who played pickup after work on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I played with another group of people who played very late on Tuesdays. So there were weeks where I would play 5-6 hours of basketball as sort of exercise, enjoyment, fun, camaraderie. I have not dribbled a basketball since March, and it's very. I find that very much a big loss. I've been able to work out, so that's good. I've been able to work out more than I was, but that's huge. Like I said before, restaurants, like I enjoy going to a restaurant. I enjoy going and watching a movie. I can watch a movie in my house, but it's not the same thing. So yeah, I do miss those. I sort of mourn for, not having those.
Well, have other hobbies like took over that place now? Because now that you're in your house more, I feel like they're more at home hobbies that you can do.
And yeah, that's true. I've spent a lot more time. I enjoy hiking. and I enjoy going for walks. I enjoy hiking in the woods, and I've gone for a lot more hikes through a lot more trails. Like I got an all trails subscription, so that I could have like access to the maps offline in case I got lost. So I've spent more time doing that, which again, not home, but like you'll go out on these trails and you're fairly isolated from a lot of people, depending which trail you pick. Some are very crowded, but the other thing that I do is obviously spending more time with my family. We started watching. I have a Disney Plus subscription. We started watching the old DuckTales from when I was a child. It's basically our thing after dinner. We'll watch like DuckTales from the 80s or 90s, whenever that first aired. So that's fun. And I've always been a big video gamer. So, I'm no stranger to sitting in my house and playing video games for 5-6 hours straight. So I will still on occasion do that. And my kids both will play video games. So we'll play together. So.
You should watch Boy Meets World.
The original,
the original.
I guess the new one's Girl Meets World.
That's not as good as all.
I definitely watched a bunch of that. I appreciate that recommendation. Thank you.
Well, so I don't know what else to say. Do you have any advice at all for anybody at the middle school, I guess?
Sure. Middle school students, in general, or COVID related, or any?
Just any advice at all.
Any advice at all. My wisdom as an old person. I would say, I think I noticed some of your questions were about like sort of choosing your path and sort of regrets or whatever. I think what I would say is very important to sort of follow your like people will say follow your passion. I think action precedes motivation, right? Like before, like you don't just sit there and think, oh well, like I don't know. If I were you and I had an English essay to write, I wouldn't sit there and wait for motivation to write my essay and then start doing it, because I would have never done it. Instead, what you have to do is you have to start working on it. And when you start doing something, your mind, the way your subconscious and the way your motivation system works, is it starts sort of offering ideas to you once you start sort of focusing on a thing. So I would say always remember that. So instead of saying like, well, I'm not going to work on this until I feel like it, the other thing is saying, well, it'd be good if I could get started. Is there something I can do to start, right? Think of something small to do. Like anything you're willing to do to start whatever project it is you're sort of maybe intimidated by. And English essay maybe is not the best example, but just think about maybe you have a technology build or something that you're interested in, but maybe you're a little intimidated because it's harder than something you've done before. And you say, well, but what's an easy thing I can get started? Right? Like, let me start small. What would be the first step? And the funny thing is, if you take that first small step, suddenly that sort of motivation comes and the next step comes easier. And then you're not even in the point of where you're trying to convince yourself to start, you're going. I think the only other, I think I had another idea for some advice. Give me 1 second. It might come back. But I think that's it. I think by doing is the best way to learn. And so if there's ever a thing that you're a little on the edge, I don't know if this will be right for me, give it a shot, figure it out. And, you can always making mistakes is how I've always learned. I mean, I feel like that's the engineering way. I think in a certain sense, from what I saw in your videos, you get that. I saw you make an error. And
I made a lot of errors.
Yeah. And then you came back and you said, well, great. I figured out 2 ways to do this, one that doesn't work and one that works. I mean, you didn't say that, but that was the sort of idea. That does not only apply to sort of, a technology build. it applies to everything. Like that's how, because like to expect that, like that's how everyone learned everything. And that's how you learn, like, as you talked about before, the sort of interpersonal intercommunication skills. That's what you learn there too. Like you start talking to somebody and you feel a little awkward. And then it doesn't work out and you say, well, that didn't work. Maybe there's some other approach I can take next time. And so I think that's the real lesson that everyone can learn is be willing to make mistakes. Obviously be careful about, some mistakes are higher risk than others. So be smart about it, but, be willing to sort of put yourself out there and take a risk, the minor ones. So
Yeah, I can agree with that. Cause like over the summer, like I have been working a lot, like with my hands and with technology, and I've made a lot of mistakes and it can get frustrating, but I have definitely learned a lot. Probably like the most I've ever learned in my life just over this one summer.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I got news for you, Lucas. If you you come across to me from what I know of you as someone who really enjoys learning things. You think that's like you're saying that's the most you've ever learned. You can continue to accelerate that. Like for myself, here I am. I'm 44. This last, like we bought this company we purchased, we are 60 some days in. So it's 2 months ago. I've learned more in those 2 months than I think I learned in the whole 6 months prior to that. And it wasn't like I wasn't busy before that. So you can continue to sort of accelerate that throughout your life, and always get that enjoyment. Cool. Awesome.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before?
No, the only thing I would say is I really enjoyed this interview. I appreciate your letter.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time, and good luck.
Okay. Well, thanks. Guess that's where we end for today.
Great. Thank you.